These are the crown jewels of the American intelligence community of the United States government. If this information is compromised, we're going to suffer very serious national security damage. You cannot have special access program information sitting out in the open.
If I were Hillary Clinton's criminal defense lawyer, I would treat this situation with grave urgency, because the conduct that we've now seen she is engaged in is the same type of conduct that led the Justice Department to charge David Petraeus.
Our lead story about emails, the Inspector General from the intelligence community saying emails on Hillary Clinton's unsecure server included SAP, special access programs. That's more secret than even top secret emails. This comes as new polls are out here in New Hampshire. Check out this poll, the CNN MUR poll. Bernie Sanders up 27 points. He gained 10 points since December. Clinton has dropped 7. Now look at the RCP average, Real Clear Politics average here in New Hampshire. You can see that Sanders does have still a significant lead here in New Hampshire. That's the average of recent polls. Take a look at Iowa, and you can see it's neck and neck in Iowa, with Sanders closing the gap there in recent days. So let's bring in our panel from Washington. Tucker Carlson, host of Fox and Friends Weekend; Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio; and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Tucker, let's start with the emails and this Democratic race.
This is it. This is the smoking gun. Keep in mind, this memo was produced not by a conservative news outlet, but by a professional investigator who works for the Obama executive branch, and it shows conclusively that dozens of the very most secret possible data points in possession of the U.S. government wound up on an unsecured server, which, by the way, the U.S. intelligence community believes was penetrated by foreign intelligence services. I spoke to someone right before the show who's been covering this, who said if this were a member of the uniformed military who'd done this, or a CIA operations officer, they'd be in jail right now. It's impossible to talk our way out of this. I think this is a pivot point in the Democratic race.
Mark, can we clearly say now that what she said at the beginning of this controversy was not true about the classified emails?
She said there was never classified information on her private server, and now we have an Inspector General saying yes, there was, and it was pretty high-level classified information. What we haven't heard from the Clinton campaign or her lawyers yet, but she really needs to explain this. I mean, if it's true, it's extremely serious.
And serious for this race, Mark?
Oh, serious for this race. No, absolutely. She conceivably could still end up getting the nomination, even with this information out there, even with an indictment. But she'd be a very, very wounded, almost, I think, mortally wounded general election candidate if that happens.
Charles?
What people have to understand is that there is nothing higher, more secret than an SAP. And that, from some people I've talked to, this is worse than what Snowden did, because he didn't have access to SAP. And if this is compromised, this is so sensitive that the reason it is that as a result, if it's compromised, people die. It also means that operations that have been embedded for years and years get destroyed and cannot be reconstituted. This is very serious. Petraeus, as was mentioned earlier, he pled guilty because precisely of this kind of information he shared. And I don't see, given the fact that he's the Inspector General of the intelligence community who is writing this officially to the intelligence committee heads in Congress, that there's any way to contradict this. It's not a news story. This is an investigative story. And now it's in the hands of the FBI. It's hard to imagine that the Department of Justice will ignore this or wave it away.
Okay, quickly, lightning round here on the Republican side. Right now, Sarah Palin is endorsing Donald Trump. You had a lot of activity today as you take a look at the Real Clear Politics average in New Hampshire. Trump is up. John Kasich has moved to number 2, and it's pretty tight after that, but Trump has a big lead. And in Iowa, it's neck and neck between Trump and Cruz in the Real Clear Politics average of polls. Tucker, Mara, then Charles, wrap up where the state of the race is right now and whether these endorsements mean anything.